The morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen counter, turning the scattered birthday decorations into a riot of colors. Bright blue streamers tangled with golden ribbons, tiny confetti flakes glittering like shards of forgotten promises. I adjusted the plates of homemade cinnamon rolls, the smell curling into the air, warm and inviting. Today was supposed to be a celebration. My little niece, Emma, was turning 8, and I had spent the last 2 days making sure everything felt perfect, from the rainbow cake with its wobbly frosting layers to the pastel balloons bobbing gently near the ceiling. Emma peeked around the doorway, her freckles catching the sunlight, eyes wide with the kind of hope only children possess. "Aunt Lily, is it ready?" she asked, bouncing on her tiptoes. I smiled, brushing a strand of chestnut hair from my face. "Almost, sweetie. Just a few more touches." There was a hum of anticipation in the air, but beneath it, something felt off. My phone buzzed repeatedly on the counter, and each time I picked it up, it was another message from my brother, Ryan. First, a vague "on my way," then an hour later, "running late, don't start without me," and finally nothing. His wife, Claire, never texted. I tried to shake it off. Ryan always runs late. But a tiny knot of unease had begun to form in my stomach. Something about the quietness of their absence felt heavier than normal. The smell of vanilla frosting mixed with cinnamon, rich and sweet, while Emma helped me place tiny edible stars along the cake's edge. She looked up at me with shining eyes, a reminder of why I had spent so much energy creating this moment, to make her feel loved, to give her a day that sparkled even if the grown-up world was messy. Outside, the sound of traffic drifted in, the occasional honk slicing through the quiet domestic warmth. I caught sight of a security van idling across the street. I remembered Ryan mentioning that Claire had been concerned about a package delivered yesterday, but the unease I'd felt seemed misplaced at the time. Now, every little noise felt magnified, the slam of a neighbor's door, the distant bark of a dog. Emma grabbed my hand, tugging me toward the living room. "Aunt Lily, can we light the candles yet?" I took a deep breath, kneeling to her level. "Almost, baby. Just wait a second." And then my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize flashed across the screen. I answered, expecting a delivery or maybe a friend wishing Emma happy birthday early. Instead, a clipped voice on the other end said, "Lily, this is serious. Your brother, he thinks you took money." I froze. Cinnamon rolls in hand, cake half decorated, balloons swaying lazily above us. My heart hammered against my ribs as disbelief collided with confusion. Emma frowned, sensing my sudden stillness. "No, that's not possible," I whispered, almost to myself. My hands shook. The room felt smaller, warmer, and somehow suffocating all at once. The sunlight on the counter didn't feel comforting anymore. I hung up, staring at the walls I had painted a calming dove gray just last week. The air tasted suddenly metallic. Emma's small hand gripped mine tightly, and I realized that today, my careful planning, my hope, my love, was about to be overshadowed by a storm I hadn't seen coming. A soft click came from the security camera monitor in the corner of the kitchen. Footage that I hadn't looked at in weeks now flickered, showing a shadow moving in ways I didn't understand. My stomach twisted as a creeping thought formed. Maybe this wasn't about me at all. The warmth in the room began to fade. And in that moment, as I set the knife down beside the cake, hope faltered, just enough for the first seeds of doubt to take root. The front door clicked open, and I turned, expecting Ryan's familiar grin, maybe a hasty apology for being late. Instead, Claire stepped in first, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood, a stiff smile plastered across her face. Behind her, Ryan followed, eyes flicking nervously to the floor. "Happy birthday, Emma," Claire said, voice sugar-sweet but hollow. She carried a small gift bag, which I noticed felt unusually light. Emma squealed and ran toward them, clutching her aunt's hand, still glowing with excitement. I forced a smile, but it faltered under the weight of what I had just been told. "Hey," I said to Ryan, my voice steady despite the quiver in my chest. "We need to talk." He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "About what?" "About the money." I kept my voice soft, trying not to alarm Emma, who now perched on the couch with her gift bag unopened. Claire shifted uncomfortably, as if the room had suddenly become unbearably warm. "Lily, you're overreacting," she said. "Ryan thinks you took some funds, but it's probably just a misunderstanding." I blinked, unable to process how quickly the room had turned cold. Misunderstanding? This was an accusation, one I had never expected, and from my own brother, no less. I glanced at the cake, half-decorated, frosting smudged on the counter. The smell, once comforting, now mingled with the sour taste of dread. Emma's wide eyes searched mine, sensing the tension I tried to mask. Across the room, my neighbor Mrs. Caldwell appeared at the window, waving apologetically. She'd noticed the argument brewing even from the street. Her concern was genuine, and it cut through the fog of betrayal like a small beam of light. I didn't take anything," I said quietly, my words trembling despite my effort to stay calm. "You have to check the records. Check the accounts. Something's wrong." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Lily, I just know the money's missing." Claire saw it gone. Claire gave a subtle nod, eyes darting away, lips pressed tight. She hadn't looked me in the eye once. And suddenly, the amount, $600,000, hovered in the room like a heavy, invisible weight. Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Aunt Lily, are you okay?" I crouched to her level, forcing a reassuring smile. "Yes, baby, I'm fine." But my insides churned, and I could feel the sting of tears threatening to escape. The rest of the morning blurred. Gifts went unopened. Cinnamon rolls grew cold, and the half-melted cake sat untouched. Each laugh from Emma sounded hollow against the growing tension. I realized I had spent hours preparing a perfect day, and it had already slipped through my fingers. Ryan muttered something about needing to call the bank again. Claire busied herself with clearing plates. The accusations hung between us, heavy and unspoken, even as we tried to carry on. At one point, Emma looked up at Ryan, eyes brimming with confusion. "Uncle Ryan, why are you mad at Aunt Lily?" The silence that followed hit me harder than any words could. Ryan didn't answer. He just walked to the window, staring out at the driveway, avoiding her gaze. Claire followed him, silently. And in that quiet, Emma's small question echoed in my chest, a reminder of what I was truly fighting for. My hope for a joyful morning, a family celebration, had cracked. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal, and its weight pressed down like a stone on my heart. I realized then, holding Emma close, that this day, our carefully built moment of warmth, had already begun to crumble. And I couldn't let it go unnoticed. I sit on the edge of the couch after the birthday chaos, Emma curled beside me, her small hand in mine. The events of the morning weigh heavy, but my mind drifts backward, trying to make sense of a pattern that had been building for years. It wasn't the first time Ryan had blamed me for things that weren't my fault, and it certainly wasn't the first time Claire had stood silently on the sidelines, letting suspicion take root. I remember college days, when Ryan had borrowed my savings for tuition, promising he'd pay me back as soon as the scholarship came through. I had trusted him because he was my brother. I had believed in him. Weeks turned into months. The money disappeared somewhere between his car payments and late-night dinners he said were essential. I never asked again, telling myself he needed it more than I did. But the memory still stings, a lesson in trust one hadn't realized I was learning the hard way. Then came our family holidays. Christmases filled with laughter and presents, yet I often noticed I was footing more of the bills. Gifts for nieces and nephews, groceries, decorations. My bank account shrinking quietly while Ryan and Claire spent lavishly. And every time I tried to speak up, it was deflected. "You're always the responsible one," they'd say, eyes full of expectation. I had been groomed to absorb the stress, to manage the household finances, to keep everyone happy while keeping my own needs quiet. I think back to a time when I was barely 21, living in my first apartment. Ryan had asked me to co-sign for a lease, so he and Claire could rent a bigger place. "It's just for a few months," he had assured me. Months turned into years. I had paid late fees, utility bills, and even replaced broken furniture he insisted I could manage. Claire never offered help, and Ryan's gratitude was always mixed with a reminder. You're the responsible one. And then there was the subtle psychological manipulation, the whispered comparisons to other siblings, the sighs when I didn't act fast enough, the way I was made to feel guilty for wanting to save money or pursue my own dreams. It was like living under a cloud that never fully lifted, a cloud that now, decades later, had morphed into a storm. I glanced at Emma, absorbed in the coloring book on the floor, unaware of the growing tension. She is why I tolerated so much. I wanted her life to be different from mine, full of security, love, and fairness. And yet, here I was, accused of theft in my own home, my integrity questioned, while the very person who had caused the real damage, the money gone, the missing $600,000, stood silent, watching me flounder. Digital betrayals had begun even before today. I had discovered once that a private post of mine had been shared with friends of Ryan and Claire, twisted into a narrative that made me appear careless with money. Family gatherings became exercises in subtle gaslighting. My opinions dismissed, my actions doubted, and every time I tried to explain, I was met with smiles that didn't reach the eyes or gentle rebukes that implied I was overreacting. The thought that this pattern had gone unnoticed by everyone else in our lives felt lonely. Friends who might have intervened had learned to stay quiet, neighbors who suspected nothing more than occasional tension. I had carried the responsibility alone, internalized every slight, every subtle accusation, every misdirected anger. But now, the stakes were higher. The accusation wasn't a few $100s. It was $600,000. And Claire, who had always stood by silently during minor betrayals, now had a role in orchestrating the biggest one yet. The magnitude of the betrayal makes the past flash before me, not as distant memories, but as a clear trail of manipulation, control, and quiet exploitation. I take a deep breath, feeling the weight settle in my chest. Understanding the pattern doesn't make the sting less sharp. It only clarifies why I feel so deeply wounded. Nostalgia for what should have been, shock at the reality, and finally, clarity. This is not an accident. This is not misunderstanding. This is deliberate. And as I watch Emma's small fingers trace shapes on the coloring book, I know that my next steps will not be about appeasing Ryan or Claire. They will be about protecting what truly matters: truth, integrity, and the family I choose to nurture, not the one that manipulates me. The tension tightens in my shoulders, but with it comes a flicker of determination. Today's betrayal is not the first, and it will not be the last, but it will be the moment I begin to reclaim control. 2 days had passed since the disastrous birthday morning. Emma clung to my side like a small shield, unaware of the financial storm quietly gathering around us. I tried to breathe through each moment, but a lingering unease settled in my chest, heavy and persistent. It was during my mid-morning coffee that the email arrived. The subject line was stark, clinical, account discrepancy, immediate action required. I clicked hesitantly, and the numbers leapt off the screen. $600,000 vanished. And the note accompanying it was worse than the missing sum. It implied my involvement, phrased carefully to avoid direct accusation, but heavy enough to send my pulse racing. I felt my hands tremble as I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. My coffee cup rattled against the counter. For a moment, disbelief paralyzed me. This couldn't be real. Not this. Not now. Not after everything I had done to protect our family. Emma's small voice broke through my panic. "Aunt Lily, are you okay?" I forced a smile, masking the shaking inside. "Yes, sweetie. I'm fine." But my mind raced, calculating how impossible this claim was. I hadn't touched a cent beyond what was already accounted for. Every transaction, every deposit, every withdrawal had a paper trail. And then it clicked. The security camera footage from Ryan and Claire's house, the one I had only glanced at during the birthday chaos, needed a second look. My stomach tightened as I recalled the shadows moving oddly in the corner of the frame, the brief moments when Claire appeared to linger around the safe. My blood ran cold. The realization hit like a punch. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. And Claire, Ryan's wife, the woman who had always smiled politely while hiding her true intentions, was at the center of it. I stared at the monitor, replaying the footage frame by frame. There it was, her hands quick and precise, taking what didn't belong to her. My chest constricted, a wave of anger flooding through disbelief. Every past slight, every subtle accusation, every moment I had been made to feel guilty, it all clicked into place. I had been set up, and Ryan had blindly believed her without question.
My phone rang.
I almost didn't answer, but curiosity overpowered fear. It was Ryan. Lily, we need to discuss this. I don't understand how this could happen, he said, voice tight. I think you do, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm despite the racing blood. Check the security footage. Look at the accounts. Claire is responsible. There was silence on the other end. A pause so long it felt like a countdown. Finally, Ryan muttered, I need to see it. Can you send me the files? I did. Each file uploaded like a declaration of truth, a spark of hope flickering through the anger. And yet, the betrayal remained, $600,000 stolen, trust broken, family fractured. I sank into the couch, feeling the weight of weeks, months, years of manipulation settle around me. My body shook, not with fear, but with a growing resolve. For years, I had allowed others' decisions, their lies, and their control to dictate my life. No more. This moment, the trigger, was different. This was not a minor accusation or subtle manipulation. This was the final straw, a blatant violation that could no longer be ignored or excused. I glanced at Emma, coloring quietly beside me. She was the reason I couldn't allow fear to take over, couldn't let anger cloud my judgment. I had to act, and act carefully, decisively. For the first time in years, clarity replaced the fog. They would not manipulate me this time. The anger simmered, a quiet, controlled fire. And deep inside, I knew this would be the moment I drew the line, the moment I reclaimed control over my life and my family. A spark of rebellion had been lit. The next morning, I woke with a tightness in my chest, a lingering echo of the anger and disbelief from the day before. But this time, it wasn't paralyzing. Instead, it felt like a coiled spring ready to release, carefully, deliberately. I began with the simplest act, locking the online accounts that Ryan and Claire assumed I couldn't control. Each password reset, each verification step, felt like a small, private victory. The numbers on the screen that had once signaled vulnerability now symbolized authority. I was no longer a passive participant in someone else's game. Emma joined me at the table, her small hand brushing against mine. "What are you doing?" she asked, curiosity sparkling in her green eyes. "Taking care of things, baby," I said, voice calm, almost gentle. "Making sure everything is safe." Her nod was innocent, trusting. She had no idea how much this moment mattered. Not just for the money, but for the message it sent. I would no longer be controlled, questioned, or blamed unfairly. I decided to take another small step, a symbolic act that would make it clear I was asserting boundaries. Claire had sent a passive-aggressive text requesting a loan to cover a minor expense, an amount I knew would be manipulated into yet another accusation. I sent her back a single dollar, accompanied by a brief note. "This is all I can offer. Use it wisely." It was a tiny rebellion, but it felt monumental. The air seemed lighter, the room brighter. Emma giggled, unaware of the gravity of the act, spinning a crayon between her fingers. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small smile, a taste of freedom. I made a list of practical boundaries. No shared financial decisions without documentation. No unexplained access to accounts. No unquestioned assumptions about responsibility. Every entry felt like a brick laid in the foundation of a new life, one where my autonomy was no longer negotiable. Later that evening, I cooked a simple dinner for Emma and myself. Spaghetti, her favorite, with a sprinkle of Parmesan she insisted on adding herself. The aroma filled the apartment, mingling with the soft glow of the kitchen lights. We laughed over spilled sauce and clumsy twirls of pasta, a rare reprieve from the tension that had shadowed our lives for weeks. And yet, in the back of my mind, I remained aware of the simmering storm outside my controlled environment. Ryan and Claire would not be pleased with my sudden assertion. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had prepared, documented, and fortified my own boundaries. I spent the night reviewing the security footage again, taking notes, creating a timeline. Every action, every motion, every shadow of Claire's intrusion was recorded meticulously. I felt the power returning, slowly, steadily, like a tide reclaiming its territory. By the time I went to bed, Emma asleep beside me, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The rebellion wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There were no arguments or confrontations yet. But it was a rebellion nonetheless, a deliberate refusal to be victimized. I thought about the small victories, locked accounts, documented evidence, $1 sent in place of $1,850. Each one was a brick in the wall I was building around my peace, a shield against manipulation and false accusations. The inner quake I had felt in the past had been replaced by a quiet, deliberate calm. And as I turned off the lights, I pictured a future where Emma could grow up without watching her family crumble under deception. I imagined mornings filled with laughter, afternoons of carefree play, and evenings where trust and honesty weren't luxuries, but a given. The rebellion was complete, not in grand gestures, but in consistent, deliberate choices. The freedom I felt was subtle, almost imperceptible, but real. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that control could return to me, piece by piece. Tomorrow, I thought, would bring the storm. But tonight, I slept in peace, knowing I had drawn the line and nothing, not even a family member, could cross it without consequences. The next morning, the calm I had cultivated shattered like glass. A sharp knock at the door jolted me from breakfast with Emma. My pulse quickened, but I remained composed. This was expected. I knew they wouldn't accept my quiet rebellion without a fight. I opened the door to find Claire standing there, face pale and tight-lipped, and Ryan just behind her, his jaw clenched. Their presence felt like a storm pressing against the walls of my apartment, heavy and threatening. "Lily, what is this?" Claire demanded, gesturing toward my laptop where the accounts were still open, displaying the meticulous records I had compiled. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted calmly, stepping aside to let them in, though I remained firmly at the threshold. "And I have. You both need to see the truth for yourselves." Ryan's face shifted through confusion, anger, and disbelief in rapid succession. "The accounts, the records. Are you saying Claire?" "Yes," I said, voice steady. "She's been manipulating everything. The money isn't missing because of me. It's missing because of her actions, and the footage proves it." Claire's expression flickered, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Lily, you're making accusations you can't prove," she said sharply, though her eyes betrayed a hint of fear. I gestured toward the monitor. "Then watch." Frame by frame, the security footage played, Claire moving around the safe, hands quick and deliberate, taking bundles of documents and cash. Ryan's face drained of color as the undeniable truth unfolded before him. He had trusted her over me for so long, and now reality hit like a punch to the chest. Emma clutched my sleeve, sensing the tension. "Aunt Lily, what's happening?" I knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. "It's okay, baby. We're going to be fine." The confrontation escalated. Claire began shouting, her voice piercing, accusing me of manipulating the footage, calling me paranoid. Ryan hesitated, torn between his lifelong trust in me and the years of influence Claire had exerted over him. Just then, a neighbor I had confided in a week ago, Mr. Thompson, appeared in the doorway. A retired police officer, he had volunteered to review the footage before I presented it to Ryan. "I can verify the authenticity of this recording," he said quietly, authoritative. "Everything here is legitimate." The room went silent. Emma's eyes darted between all of us. She whispered, "Uncle Ryan, why didn't you believe Aunt Lily?" Ryan's shoulders slumped.
I,
I don't know. I wanted to believe Claire. His voice was heavy with shame, regret pooling in the lines around his eyes. Claire stormed toward the door, slamming it behind her. The sound reverberated through the apartment, but I didn't flinch. I had anticipated this, and I stayed grounded, calm, and resolute. I turned back to Ryan. You needed to see the truth. And now you have. I hope you understand that boundaries are not suggestions. They are necessary for trust and safety. I won't allow this to happen again. Emma's small hand squeezed mine. We're okay, Aunt Lily? Yes, baby, I whispered, pulling her close. We're more than okay. We're safe, and we're together. That's what matters. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Not for Ryan or Claire, but for myself. The storm outside my threshold had come, as I knew it would, but I had faced it without flinching. I had stood firm, defended my truth, and shielded the one I loved most. And as Claire's car faded down the street, leaving only a whisper of tires on asphalt, I realized that confrontation, though painful, had brought moral clarity. Fear had given way to composure, and the chaotic energy that had once dominated our home now felt replaced with a sense of victory, quiet, earned, undeniable. The rebellion was no longer symbolic, it had become tangible. And in that room, with Emma beside me, I understood that standing firm wasn't just about protecting money, it was about protecting integrity, dignity, and the life we were rebuilding together. The days following the confrontation were quieter, though not empty. Emma and I moved through our routines with a new sense of calm, a soft layer of relief settling over us. The storm of accusation had passed, leaving behind clarity and the faint scent of possibility. Unexpectedly, the people who had been distant or silent before began to show themselves in small, meaningful ways. Mrs. Caldwell, my neighbor from across the street, knocked one morning with a basket of freshly baked banana bread, her warm smile a balm to the lingering tension. I thought you might like a little treat, she said, setting it on the kitchen counter. You've been through a lot, Lily. At work, my colleagues noticed the shift in my demeanor and offered support in ways both tangible and emotional. One of my supervisors quietly handed me a gift card for groceries, noting, "You deserve a break." Another coworker dropped off a handwritten note that read simply, "You're stronger than you realize." Even Emma's teacher reached out, offering extra tutoring sessions to ease her anxiety after the family chaos. Each gesture reminded me that community was not defined by obligation or blood alone. It was defined by kindness, generosity, and presence. I found myself reflecting on the contrast between those who had manipulated and accused me and those who had quietly extended care. It was an education in human nature and in the importance of discernment. Not everyone who claims to be family is trustworthy. Sometimes, support comes from unexpected places, and the smallest acts can carry the most profound weight. Financially, I began to feel the first taste of security in years. I carefully tracked our money, creating a detailed spreadsheet, noting the $600,000 loss as a reminder of what had been endured and overcome. Seeing the numbers align, watching the surplus reemerge slowly, felt like breathing again after holding my breath for far too long. Emma noticed the difference too. She laughed more freely, her small steps on the living room rug lighter, her smile brighter. The tension that had clouded our mornings was lifting, replaced with quiet stability. I realized how much weight had been lifted, not from the money alone, but from the knowledge that we were safe, our lives now guided by boundaries I had enforced. One evening, as we sat on the couch together, Emma's head resting against my shoulder, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The storm had shown me who truly cared. It had shown me that safety and trust weren't things to be assumed. They were things to be cultivated. And above all, it had shown me that I was capable of standing firm, even when the world seemed intent on testing me. I walked to the window, looking out over the quiet street. The leaves rustled softly, sunlight catching the edges of the trees in a gentle glow. In that moment, I realized that for the first time in years, our home felt bigger, not because of the space, but because of the openness and support that surrounded us. The phone buzzed with messages from neighbors offering help with small errands, lunches, and homework. It was a gentle reminder that kindness existed, waiting quietly for those willing to accept it. Emma's small hand slid into mine, and I squeezed gently. See, baby? We're not alone. For the first time, I could let myself imagine a life beyond fear and manipulation. The house, once filled with tension and accusation, now resonated with light, laughter, and support. And as I tucked Emma into bed that night, I whispered quietly to myself, for once, the house felt bigger. It was a statement of fact, of victory, and of the first seeds of healing. Weeks turned into months, and Emma and I settled into a rhythm that felt foreign yet comforting. The mornings were quiet, filled with the soft hum of routine. Breakfast together, gentle laughter over spilled cereal, and the aroma of fresh coffee filling the apartment. The tension that had once clung to the walls was gone, replaced with the steady pulse of everyday life, calm and predictable. I found solace in small, creative pursuits I had abandoned during the chaos. Painting became my refuge. Brushes swept across canvases, blending colors in ways that mirrored my emotional recovery. Each stroke was deliberate, intentional, a reflection of control regained. Emma often sat nearby, doodling in her sketchbook, her joy unrestrained and contagious. Even our financial life felt lighter. I continued tracking expenses meticulously, watching slowly as savings rebuilt and small luxuries returned to our lives. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. Each deposit, each well-planned budget, was a reminder that boundaries weren't just rules, they were the framework of freedom. New connections began to emerge. At the local library, I met Claire, a coworker-turned-friend from a volunteer program. She was easy to talk to, honest in her care, a presence unburdened by hidden motives. Simple conversations over coffee became a balm, reinforcing that not everyone sought to manipulate or exploit. Occasionally, Ryan reached out, tentative and awkward, offering apologies that hung heavy with guilt. I listened politely, explained my position, but maintained firm boundaries. Our past could not be erased, and trust needed time to rebuild. Claire's absence from these interactions was a relief, a reminder that accountability came with consequences. Emma thrived alongside me. She tackled school projects with newfound confidence, her laughter echoing through the apartment as we celebrated small victories. A perfect art project, a completed book report, or a simple evening spent together cooking dinner. I watched her grow, understanding that the stability we had fought for was finally manifesting in her life as well. Even the apartment itself became a symbol of renewal. Fresh paint covered the walls, each color chosen to represent calm and optimism. New plants occupied the corners, their green vibrancy a daily reminder of life's resilience. I hung a photo of Emma and me in the living room, a small, private tribute to our survival and growth. Boundaries remained firm. When Claire attempted to send messages or call, I responded only with polite deflection, never letting the past manipulate my present. I had learned that forgiveness did not require access, nor did kindness mean tolerating deceit. The freedom I had cultivated allowed me to interact with the world on my own terms, confident and unshaken. One evening, as Emma and I prepared dinner together, she looked up and said, "Aunt Lily, I like our home. It feels happy." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't allowed myself to feel for years. "Me too, baby," I said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "It feels like ours." And in that quiet moment, with the sunlight falling through the window and the aroma of garlic and herbs filling the air, I understood the full extent of what we had accomplished. The rebellion had not just reclaimed my control, it had rebuilt our life. Freedom was no longer a distant hope, it was the very fabric of our days. Our past remained, shadowed and present, but it no longer dictated our steps. Every brushstroke, every budgeted dollar, every laugh shared with Emma was a testament to the life we had rebuilt, one rooted in love, safety, and unwavering boundaries. A year had passed since the confrontation that had changed everything. The apartment, once tense and chaotic, now resonated with light, laughter, and warmth. Emma ran ahead of me, her backpack bouncing as she skipped toward the small table by the window, ready for breakfast. The table was set simply: fresh fruit, toast, and orange juice. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the room. The faint smell of coffee lingered in the air, and I paused to savor it, a reminder that normalcy, peace, and happiness were not just possibilities anymore, but the foundation of our everyday life. We had celebrated birthdays, holidays, and small victories with a sense of authenticity I had never known before. Emma's laughter was no longer punctuated by tension or doubt. She thrived in school, her confidence growing alongside the security of our home. I watched her, a quiet pride swelling in my chest. Occasionally, distant messages from Ryan appeared, cautious and measured. I read them, acknowledged them politely, but maintained my boundaries. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting, and trust had to be earned anew, carefully, deliberately. Claire was no longer part of our lives, her absence a relief rather than a void. Today, I was preparing a small celebration for Emma's 9th birthday. The decorations were minimal, but the atmosphere was rich with intention and love. I tied ribbons around a small stack of presents, the scent of fresh cake filling the room. Everything was calm. Everything was ours. Emma looked up at me with bright eyes. "Aunt Lily, this is perfect." I smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her forehead. "It's perfect because we're together, baby. That's what matters." As she helped me arrange the final touches, I reflected on the journey we had traveled. The betrayal, the accusations, the stolen $600,000. All of it had been part of a path that led to clarity, resilience, and genuine freedom. I had learned the importance of boundaries, the value of true support, and the strength I carried within myself. I glanced at the security monitor one last time, not with suspicion, but as a quiet reminder of how far we had come. What once caused panic and fear now served as evidence of survival, proof that honesty, courage, and determination could overcome manipulation. Emma placed a small candle on the cake and looked up at me expectantly. I took her hand and whispered, "Make a wish, baby." She closed her eyes, cheeks rosy, and blew gently. I watched her, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to fully believe in the goodness of life, the safety of home, and the enduring power of truth. As the afternoon sunlight bathed the apartment in warmth, I opened my journal and scribbled a single reflection: boundaries create freedom. Integrity protects love. Family is chosen as much as it is given. And then, as Emma danced around with her gifts, I let myself breathe fully, deeply, at peace. The years of manipulation, doubt, and betrayal had ended. We had rebuilt, healed, and grown stronger. And in the quiet stillness of that afternoon, I realized the lesson I had been striving to teach Emma all along. Love, safety, and respect are earned through honesty, courage, and steadfast care. I closed the journal gently, a small smile touching my lips, and whispered to no one but the universe. Home. Narrator, Lily Harper.